most disturbing and bizarre cases of mass murder is committed by John Haigh, a respectable, well-dressed, middle-class man with immense charm, who in the 1940s disposed of at least 6 victims in a manner that led to some to label him a vampire. Haigh's motivations for his crimes, which involved luring his prey to a fate where their blood was consumed before being dissolved in acid, have never been clearly corroborated. His claim to have been disturbed in his childhood by his strict religious parents, leading to psychotic state of mind, obsessed with religious iconography and sacrificial fantasies, has been disputed. Critics believe that instead of insanity fueling Haigh's vampire-like activities, he was in fact a cold-hearted killer who arrogantly believed that where there was nobody, there was no crime to pin on him. John Haigh was born on the 24th of July 1909 in Stamford, Lincolnshire. The family moved to Outwood, West Yorkshire, where Haigh spent the next 24 years of his life. He was brought up in a frantically religious household, where references to the Lord were used frequently to remind young Haigh that he was always observed by a higher and disapproving deity. Haigh himself claimed that his childhood was bleak and lonely. His only friends were his few pets and caring for the neighbour's dog. A tall fence around the house was put up by his father to keep out prying eyes or any social contact with the outside world. Haigh's parents belonged to a religious sect known as the Plymouth Brethren, who were purists and anti-clerical. Bible stories were the only form of entertainment. Even participating in sports of any kind was forbidden. According to Haigh Sr., the world was evil and the family needed to keep themselves separate, as his father had also told him that the blue blemish on his own head had been a result of him sinning in his youth. It is perhaps not surprising that young Haigh became obsessed and terrified by developing a similar sign of the devil. Due to the slightest misdemeanour, he was told that his mother had no mark, as she was an angel. It is said that a turning point in the boy's developing psyche came when Haigh realised that no such blemish would appear, despite having lied or committed some other questionable behaviour. He then started to believe that he was invincible and could get away with anything. Claims of being afflicted by dreams of gothic, nightmarish proportions, where trees would turn into crucifixes weeping blood, have to be viewed with caution. Haigh was later known to be manipulative and a compulsive liar, prone to saying anything to excuse himself from a compromising position. At the time of his arrest for murder, his personal inquiries into what may befall him if he was found to be insane is an indication that Haigh was aware that appearing bonkers, in quotation marks, I'll give you appearing bonkers and damaged by his childhood would possibly work in his favour when it came to court. In 1934, Haigh stopped attending his parents' church and married Beatrice Hammer, a 21-year-old woman he barely knew. Despite having been impressed by Haigh's manners and charm, she was uncertain about his character, but still went ahead with the marriage. On the 6th of July 1934, Haigh's parents allowed the marriage only lasted about 4 months, ending when Haigh was arrested in October 1934 and sent to prison for fraud. While he was incarcerated, Beatrice gave birth to a baby daughter, whom she gave up for adoption. Haigh saw her only once more, briefly to lie by telling her that they were never officially wed because he already had a wife at the time. Despite his abilities, Haigh spent a considerable amount of time in prison for mainly fraudulent practices that involved various illegal enterprises. During a brief period, he worked at an amusement park run by Mr. William MacDonald McSwan and his parents, Donald McSwan and his wife Amy. The family liked Haigh and promoted him in the business, and was sorry to see him leave when he decided he wanted glittering prizes elsewhere. His next project, involving setting up a false solicitor's office, earned him 4 years in prison. It was while he was incarcerated that he thought up a new scheme to become rich quickly. Instead of toiling for a living, his plan was simply to go after rich older women. Haigh had also convinced himself that if there was no corpse, then there would be no conviction. Such a belief no doubt prompted him into working with sulfuric acid in the prison's tin shop, where he experimented on mice and made studies of the effects of acid on animal tissue. After Haigh was released from prison, he set out to carry out his heinous plan. In the interim, he stayed with the Stephen family, beginning a close friendship with one of the daughters, Barbara, who, despite the 20-year age gap, believed that she could become the next Mrs. Haigh. In 1944, Haigh was involved in a car accident where he suffered a wound to his head, which bled into his mouth. He later referred to this event as having been the catalyst that reawakened his blood-filled nightmares. Shortly afterwards, he rented a basement space at 79 Gloucester Road, where he set up his workshop, a grim death trap to lure unsuspecting victims. The aftermath. Haigh finished his life story for the newspaper that had paid for his trial. He also wrote letters to Barbara Stevens and to his parents, who did not see him before he died. His mother sent greetings through a reporter. Haigh told Barbara that he believed in reincarnation and that he would be back to complete his mission. Madame Tussauds requested a fitting for a death mask, and Haigh was happy to oblige. On the 6th of August 1949, Haigh was hanged at Wandsworth Prison. Madame Tussauds erected a wax figure of Haigh, complete with his very own clothes, that he bequeathed to the institution. Oh my god, how fucking messed up is this? One, it's fucking messed up. Sorry for my swearing, but it's fucking messed up that Madame Tussauds went to that level to try and get a death mask, whatever one of those is. And fucking messed up that John left Madame Tussauds clothes for them to wear, like the arrogance. I've actually got no words. The trial. On the 18th of July 1949, 4,000 people crowded into a small town of Lewis, hoping to get a seat in the courtroom. Mr. Justice Humphreys presided. Haigh had no money to pay for his defence, so the News of the World newspaper did a deal with him and offered to pay for his counsel if he would provide them with an exclusive. The Daily Mirror newspaper was also found in contempt of court by emphasising Haigh being a vampire. The editor, Sylvester Bullam, was sentenced to 3 months in prison. The paper also had to pay £10,000 in court costs. Haigh pleaded not guilty. The prosecution rested its case of deliberate premeditation murder for gain. Haigh's defence counsel tried to rely on the issue of the defendant's insanity, describing the court how his mental illness would have affected his ability to appreciate the morality of his acts. It was clear that Haigh was aware of what he was doing and was wrong in the eyes of the law, as evidenced in his attempt to cover up his crimes. With that admission, defence collapsed. There was only one issue to be decided: the question of the prisoner's sanity. The defence's psychiatric. The defence's psychiatrist failed to prove that Haigh's judgment was impaired, also because Haigh had initially inquired about getting released from Broadmoor. It appeared as if he was thinking of using insanity to get him off the hook. The prosecution declared that Haigh was simply a man who believed that he discovered the perfect crime, committed murder for gain, and then pretended he was insane when he was caught. The jury were left to decide whether paranoia could be considered a mental disease or defect. It only took them 15 minutes to come to a conclusion. Haigh was found guilty. The judge asked Haigh if he had anything to say for himself. Haigh cocked his head and said nothing at all. Donning a black cap, the judge sentenced him to be hung until dead. The arrest. My stomach is all gurgly, sorry if you can hear that. Besides his parents, the one person who was profoundly affected by the news of Haigh being a callous mass murderer was Barbara Stevens, the woman who he was supposed to love and marry. She visited him regularly in prison, trying to understand what kind of man she had been involved with. Did he intend to kill her, she asked. He never entertained the idea, was the seemingly ingenuine reply. However, Barbara knew that at some point she may have succumbed to a similar fate when Haigh saw her as an inconvenience. There appeared to be no remorse on Haigh's part, and he revelled in revealing his grisly escapades, which were recounted in the newspapers. Although the acid had destroyed a great deal of evidence, not everything had been eliminated. Ghoulish records such as small bones, dentures, Mr. Henderson's foot and gallbladder were all discovered as the forensic team sifted through tons of mud and sludge. Technicians had to wear rubber gloves and cover their arms in Vaseline to protect themselves from the acid. They found the following: 28 pounds of human body fat, 3 faceted gallstones, part of a left foot not quite eroded, 18 fragments of human bone, upper and lower dentures intact, the handle of a red plastic bag, and a lipstick container. Despite the forensic evidence, it was Haigh's very own sense of invincibility and arrogance that was to be his greatest undoing in finding him guilty. Haigh was of the opinion that nothing could be found from his human slaughterhouse, and confidently recounted in great detail his escapades of death. As far as he was concerned, it was a case of corpus delicti. No body, no crime, no punishment. Psychiatric evaluation on the 1st of April 1949. E.G. Robbie opened the case for the prosecution before 10 Sussex magistrates. Haigh was in a confident mood and even made light banter throughout the proceedings, as if he was unaware of the magnitude of his crimes. If there ever was an illustration of his sociopathic tendencies, that is the ability to emphasize and recognize human emotion and feelings. Haigh was the perfect embodiment of such dysfunction. Haigh had, during an early confession, not only admitted to many of the deaths, but also inquired as to what the outcome would be with anyone who was declared insane. It seemed at this stage that Haigh had been mulling over the possibility of appearing mad in order to escape the noose, and had most likely invented the stories of nightmarish dreams and claims to be a vampire in order to literally save his neck. During court proceedings, E.G. Robbie called 33 witnesses to prove premeditation of murder for gain. He laid out his case in the form of basic chronology that showed how rational Haigh's movements were and how they had not been the actions of someone with diminished responsibility. Haigh was also examined by several doctors and psychologists who were interested in the defendant's claim to have the need to drink blood. Such a compulsion, if genuine, is part of a sexual deviation and related to the act of violence itself. However, Haigh, who appeared to have little interest in sex, gave no indication that he suffered from such disorder. Most of the psychologists agreed that although Haigh suffered from mental health issues, he was not insane, and had been perfectly aware of his murderous actions. Actions that had involved meticulous planning. One psychiatrist believed without any doubt that Haigh had a paranoid constitution, the same mental illness as Hitler. Haigh believed that I don't know if that really makes sense. Haigh, they believed, had most likely developed a paranoid personality to escape his parents' suffocating universe in order to relieve himself from emotional pain. His upbringing had contributed to a mental state where dividing lines between reality and fantasy had become blurred. The result was that Haigh had an acute sense of I can't say the word now. Acute sense of omnipotence, and believed that he was above the law. He was in effect an egocentric paranoiac who, although aware that killing people was against the law, still thought it was part of fulfilling his destiny. Haigh tried to impress the psychiatrists more details of his abnormal dreams and obsession with drinking blood, but none of them brought his efforts to portray him as a lunatic. However, something of which they were not aware was that Haigh had years before developed a friendship with an employee from a Sussex psychiatric hospital and had shown great interest in mental illness. He possessed a talent for deception, having over the years also posed as a lawyer, engineer and a doctor. God, how is that even possible that he could get away with such stuff even before these horrible crimes? And now we're getting into the crimes. At a public house in Kensington, Haigh chanced upon a former employer, Mac McSwan. Again, Mac was happy to see him and took Haigh to see his parents. During the friendly reunion, they told Haigh of their recent investments in property. This information was to seal their fates. After socialising with Mac for several weeks, Haigh carried out his plan on the 9th of September 1944 in Haigh's diary. He claimed that he had a sudden need for blood, so he hit McSwan over the head with a blunt instrument. Then he slit his throat. He says, "I got a mug and I took some blood from his neck in the mug and drank it." Haigh later found a 40-gallon barrel in which to put McSwan's body and then filled it with sulfuric acid. He described in his confession how, when the body was fully submerged in liquid acid, the fumes overwhelmed him and he had to go outside. Later, he covered the drum and went home to sleep, leaving his former employer and friend to dissolve into a liquid sludge. It was during the night he supposedly suffered from more surreal and blood-filled nightmares. The next day, the remains of McSwan were little more than cold liquid and lumps, which Haigh disposed of down a drain. Knowing that he had killed someone and removed all traces of them gave Haigh a feeling of euphoria. Haigh managed to convince McSwan's parents that their son had gone away to avoid conscription. He even sent fake postcards to them from Scotland, pretending to be their son. However, Haigh's main concern was to acquire the rest of the McSwan assets. The next murder would be committed with the addition of new equipment to deal with dissolving bodies, a steric pump, DIY tin face mask, and even a bathtub made of steel, painted to make it more resistant to corrosion, were all employed by Haigh in his obscene workshop of death. The McSwan murders, according to a police statement, before Haigh hit upon his plan to cruelly dispose of the remainder of the McSwan family. He also murdered 2 middle-aged women from Hammersmith. The McSwans disappeared on the 2nd of July 1945. They were killed in a similarly tragic way to their son. Haigh hit them first, killing them, and then claimed to have drunk their blood before dissolving them in acid baths. After informing the McSwans' landlady that the couple had gone to America, Haigh had all their mail forwarded to him, including Mr. McSwan's pension. He then set about forging their son's signature on a power of attorney form by forging a deed on the property owned by Mrs. McSwan and appropriating it into a false name. Haigh managed to make nearly £2,000 from selling the property. That, along with the securities and sale of possessions, totaled £6,000. For a while, Haigh managed to swindle people through a variety of scams, including posing as a liaison officer, dealing with patents, and setting up fake branches in several towns. It was also found around this time that he later claimed in a police confession that he killed and disposed of a young man called Max from Kensington. Haig's spoils from the McSwans were running out fast, and the evil psychopath needed money from new victims. This time he chose a more worldly couple, Dr. Archibald Henderson, 52, and his wife Rose, 51, who was selling their home, cultivating a relationship with the couple based on a shared passion for music. Haigh encouraged them to reveal information about their properties, renting a storehouse on Leopold Road in Crawley, London. Haigh moved his possessions from Gloucester Street and began setting up his obscene workshop once again. This time he ordered 3 carboys of sulfuric acid and 2 40-gallon drums without tops. On the 12th of February 1946, he drove Miss Dr. Henderson to Crawley and shot him in the head with the doctor's own revolver. He then left the body in a storeroom and set off to get Mrs. Henderson. After some reluctance, she was driven to the storehouse. Haigh shot her from behind after trussing up both her and her husband's bodies, left them overnight. Haigh later claimed to the police that he drank the blood from both of them. Haigh dissolved both bodies in acid, but this time the grisly act did not erase all traces. As Mr. Henderson's foot was left intact, this did not seem to bother Haigh too much, as he dumped all the remains, including the foot, in a corner of a yard. The psychopath by now felt immune to being captured. Efforts to maintain the impression that the Hendersons were still alive were methodical and time-consuming. Haigh even forged letters by Rose Henderson, writing a lengthy letter to her brother. After selling their properties and possessions, he acquired around £8,000 in total, showing the sickening contempt for his victims, and he even gave his girlfriend Barbara some of Mrs. Henderson's clothes to wear. Unexpectedly, Rose Henderson's brother, Berlin, was prepared to go to the police. Haigh managed to convince him that the couple had immigrated to South Africa on the grounds that Dr. Henderson had carried out an illegal abortion. As an indication of Haigh's depravity and sociopathic tendencies, he even planned on visiting the mother of a recently deceased school friend, whom he had spotted in the obituaries section of a local newspaper. No doubt Haigh had intentions to dispose of the grieving mother and misappropriate any possessions he could. His plan was foiled when the frail woman unexpectedly died herself. Haigh's money was once again starting to run out, mainly due to gambling and expensive tastes, which included staying at upmarket hotels. While there, he had socialised with a wealthy elderly woman, Mrs. Olive Durand Deacon, and thought up murderous plans to dispose of her. In June 1948, Haigh claimed that his car was stolen, but the Conda was found smashed at the foot of a cliff. Less than a month later, an unidentified body was found nearby. However, the police have decided that the two incidents were unrelated. Haigh denied having anything to do with the body. Even after his arrest, Haigh told his girlfriend Barbara that he wanted to collect the car insurance, and even took her to the spot where the Lagonda had been written off. It was then she began to become suspicious of her soon-to-be husband. In the meantime, despite having killed Mrs. Durand Deacon, his money was running out again and needed to pay off loans. Even though he tried to invite other people out to his Crawley end of death, no one took him up on his offer. Also, Rose Henderson's brother was once again causing problems for Haigh by insisting that the police locate his sister due to a death in the family. Haigh realised that he would have to silence him too. Before Haigh could carry out his callous intentions, he was arrested. His first comment to the reception officer when he arrived at Lewis Prison was, "Is this the result of doing 6 people, but not for personal gain?" Haigh then confessed to everything. This is a messed up case. There are so many questions I've got in my head, like I don't understand how this man was allowed to walk around the streets. But he was a criminal way before he even committed the murders, and yet I don't know. But I hope you found this case to be as interesting as I do, and I hope you find it super relaxing, and I hope it's lulled you into a deep sleep. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys in my next video. My stomach, I think it's because I'm like laying on my side.